Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Blackview A20. This is an ultra low-cost Android smartphone running on Android Go edition based off Oreo 8.1, and it gives us a nearly unsolicited version of Android that's very clean and stock. It's also quite light to perform fairly well, I'd say, on very low-end hardware. When on sale, this phone sells for only about $40 to $50 without a contract. It's unlocked, supports 4G LTE bands, and has a dual SIM capability. So for a super low-cost phone, it also comes with pretty low-end specs, inclusive of a MediaTek quad-core 1.3 GHz processor, 1 GB of RAM, and 8 GB of built-in storage. Normally that wouldn't run very well at all on a normal version of Android, but thanks to Android Go edition, which has lighter apps as well as a lighter operating system, it makes the experience seem a little snappier than what you'd probably expect. So taking a closer look at the design of the A20 first, it does have a pretty new 2:1 aspect ratio display that measures 5.5 inches diagonally. It's closer in size to a older 16:9 aspect ratio 5-inch phone like this one over here, and you can tell that again dimensions are roughly the same. Here is another 2:1 aspect ratio, so newer phone with a 5.7-inch screen, and you can tell that it is a little bit smaller than that. So that means Blackview actually did a pretty good job, I would say, on the design, just because bezels aren't overly large. They still are pretty prominent compared to more expensive phones like a Samsung Galaxy S9, for instance, or an iPhone, but it's not too bad overall for, again, a phone you can get for under $50. The only limiting factor, I would say, would probably be the resolution of the display, which is definitely pretty low. It's not even 720p or HD quality. It's 480 by 960, but at least it is an IPS panel, so it does have pretty good viewing angles. Colors are still pretty accurate and natural looking. Otherwise, on the right-hand spine, you have access to a volume rocker, a power switch. On the top, there's a 3.5mm headphone jack, micro USB for charging. It takes about 2 hours to completely charge the 3000 mAh capacity battery behind the removable back cover. So this is a nice feature, and the battery size is actually quite large for a again, smaller phone, I'd say, for 2018 standards, and it will definitely last you for about 2 days before you need to recharge it again. On the back, there's a dual camera setup, but it's in air quotations, because the secondary lens, just like on many other low-cost Chinese phones, doesn't seem to really do anything. It just creates a weird kind of software blur that has a round circle. It definitely feels more expensive than the price would suggest, plus you can get it in a number of unique colors, like this interesting ice blue version, which is different from other smartphones that I've seen even on more expensive prices. Another thing that I like is that in the box you have access to a free TPU case, which is actually a pretty nice case just because it has this nice kind of sandstone texture that makes the phone even easier to grip. So if you want to protect it, there's kind of a free case accessory as well. So launching into the software next, again, it does look very similar to regular Android, but because it's the Go edition, you do have access to Go edition apps, including YouTube Go, Gmail Go, Maps Go, and Assistant Go. Same thing with YouTube Go and Gmail Go. All the animations are flatter. They don't have as many kind of 3D effects. Everything is taking less RAM to perform. And in YouTube, what's interesting is if you want to tap on a video, for instance, it just pops up this icon that says you can either download it or press on the quality of the video that you want to watch, and then it will load up. So it always gives you kind of a warning of how much data this clip will take to play back. And overall, I didn't have too many complaints when it comes to typing and text entry, but if you type really quickly, it may lag behind a little bit compared to a more expensive phone, just something to keep in mind. So let's just tap and play back, let's say, a standard quality clip here, since the screen itself isn't even HD, so we're not going to bother with the high definition. And you can tell that loading speeds are actually pretty good. You can tell that the interface is relatively smooth, but by default we don't see the comments anymore, so that's something that's been taken out. Now, what you'll notice with the YouTube Go edition is that it doesn't offer the same functionality of kind of pinch to expand to the entire display compared to the regular version of Android. So on a 2:1 aspect ratio phone, like this one over here, you do have some black bars on the sides. That's just the way that the code for the YouTube Go edition has been written. But if you want, you can install the regular version of YouTube and you can get the full screen experience, but it's up to you. That would take more data. There's also no drag down to kind of minimize the screen. So again, some of those animations are taken away. It's louder than expected, and it doesn't distort either too much at higher volumes. You can always use your own headphones, which is one of the benefits of having kind of a micro USB port, or you can use Bluetooth. So sound quality is actually, again, pretty decent for for a low-cost phone, which again is a little bit surprising. So overall, YouTube works quite well. Loading speeds are still quite snappy and fast. It just gives you more data about how much megabytes you're using when playing back every single video that you're trying to load. We can also go into Chrome to take a quick look at the web browsing experience, and we can try loading up somewhere like the New York Times, for instance. So for sure, it's taking longer to load than on a mid-end or flagship level phone, but at least it is getting the job done. Some things haven't completely loaded up yet. Wi-Fi reception though seems to be quite strong. I consistently got around 3 bars, even though the router is on a different level of this building, so it seems to be doing all right there. And even though again the screen resolution isn't super high because the screen size is 5.5 inches compared to 6 inches, text still remains fairly legible and sharp, so even when we're zoomed out, you can still kind of read everything here just fine. Next, let's take a quick look at the camera. So I would say that camera performance is probably one of the weaker elements of this phone. Again, it has a 5 megapixel primary lens, basically. You can forget about the secondary one because it's just a kind of fake effect. But shutter speed is a little bit on the slower side. The interface here is quite reminiscent of something like iOS, but you do have quite a few options to play around with. Then there's just a software black and white mode, and there's a panoramic mode and a Pro mode, which allows us to tweak things like ISO, as well as the exposure level settings just directly from the side. So taking a quick look at some of these samples here, definitely usable, but it's, again, nothing to really write home about. If you zoom in, you don't see a tremendous amount of detail, but as long as there's a good amount of lighting, you can still get some decent shots on there. Here's a shot that was captured outside in broad daylight, and if we kind of zoom in here, we do see some details of leaves kind of present, a little bit on the overly vibrant side, but as a whole, definitely not bad. You can kind of play around with the shots and get a few interesting ones on here, despite the lack of optical image stabilization and more fancy kind of hardware components to the lens. Call quality on the Blackview A20 also was quite good. I tested out with both AT&T and T-Mobile here in the Seattle region, and I got roughly 3 bars of reception with both carriers, and I didn't really encounter any problems when it comes to talking to people. The microphone picked up my voice actually quite well, and the earpiece was loud and clean sounding too. Callers reported that my voice sounded natural on the other end, so really, as far as making phone calls are concerned, not too many problems there. Finally, if we take a quick look at the Play Store here, basically you can still download any version or any regular version of an Android app. Just be warned that the memory is going to be a little bit too demanding, I think, for something like this, because it only comes with 8 gigs of storage, and already around 2 gigs of that, 3 gigs is taken up by the operating system, leaving you with just a little bit of room for things like media and apps, which is why they kind of recommend Go Edition apps as well on the top, but it's not a very complete list, as you can imagine. There are a few popular titles like Facebook and Messenger that have been converted to the Lite Edition, but for the majority of games, you would still have to download the regular versions, and that would take up quite a bit of space, so I would be cautious when it comes to managing that. Overall, I would say performance, if you're trying to load up more popular 2D, 3D titles, they do run, but they do have pretty jumpy kind of animations, and loading times are going to be significantly longer than on kind of a regular Android phone that has at least 2 gigs of RAM, for instance. So you have to be patient for it to play back, but afterwards it does work all right. Now, as aforementioned, the software is very clean, so you don't have much bloatware at all. The only thing that they've installed here by themselves is their custom note application called Blackview Note. It's a little curious because you would think that Google has a version of a notepad that's built on into Android Go Edition, but that's actually not the case. So Blackview designed their own, and you're able to create checklists, you're able to create kind of a grocery list or just a regular note to save it, add a date, and then it's a very simple app, but it is included on here. As a low-cost phone, it also doesn't have a fingerprint scanner, so in terms of security options, you have just basically unlock it by code or by a pattern to choose from. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Blackview A20. Again, a really low-cost phone at only $40. I would say this might be a good idea as a secondary device if you are worried about breaking a more expensive phone, you just want something as a backup to take when traveling, or to give for a child as a first smartphone, or even for folks who are kind of short on cash. It's surprising how good phones are getting these days for very low cost, compared to something like a Galaxy or an iPhone that can cost for upwards of $1,000. Something like this, which is just a tiny drop in the bucket, but you already get nearly all the same functionality. Of course, performance is going to be a lot slower, but Android Go Edition is really trying to kind of bridge the gap between low-end smartphones and more expensive ones by delivering more optimized versions of the apps, as well as a more up-to-date version of the software experience as well. It's not a perfect phone, obviously, just because RAM is still on the low side, and you'll still occasionally encounter some sluggishness and slowdowns as you're navigating the UI. But for things like YouTube, web browsing, accessing basic features, it actually does a pretty good job at without encountering too many problems. And if you're interested in just a really low-cost phone, it's definitely something to take a closer look at. You can check out more details in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Blackview A20 Android Go Edition